For the first time in human history, the opportunity to join the galactic community had arrived. After years of diplomatic efforts, the Ulvron, an alien species, invited humans to participate in a peace envoy mission. The Ulvrons represented a society built not on military power or technology but on empathy and emotional intelligence. To them, the true strength of a civilization lay in its ability to wield empathy as a weapon. Among the humans who accepted the mission were a group of elite peace envoys known for their emotional intelligence and intuitive abilities. The leader of the team, Reagan, was a rare individual who could blend strategy with empathy. Accompanying her were Lawrence, who could weaponize emotions, Elliot, known for his sharp intuition, and Martha, who remained calm and analytical, always balancing the team with her clear thinking. When they arrived at the Ulvron capital, the moment of first contact had come. The capital was a magnificent city of towering crystal spires illuminated by starlight. The air was filled with an eerie silence, as if even nature itself felt the weight of the encounter. The Ulvrons were ready to greet them. Xylar, the Ulvron leader, stepped forward and addressed the humans. His calm expression and glowing eyes revealed that he was closely observing them. "Humans, you have come here not only to test your wisdom but also to reveal the depth of your hearts. We hope to make you peace envoys among us, but we cannot accept you without first testing your emotional intelligence." Reagan and her team stood before Xylar. "We are ready to act with empathy and understanding," Reagan said. "Humanity has come here to preserve galactic peace by forming emotional bonds." Yet, tensions within the team became apparent on the first evening. Lawrence sat in his room, his head in his hands, deep in thought. A sense of unease gnawed at him. When Reagan entered the room, Lawrence turned to her and said, "Something's wrong, Reagan. There's a threat among the Ulvrons. Someone is trying to manipulate our emotions." Reagan silently pondered. "If someone is using our emotional intelligence against us, this peace mission could be far more complicated than we thought." The next morning, the team set out to observe the Ulvron community more closely. At first, everything seemed calm. The Ulvrons, with their mind-reading abilities, were observing the humans and analyzing their emotional vulnerabilities. But this process began to unsettle Reagan and her team. Xylar's growing attention toward them started to draw suspicion. During one meeting, Xylar invited the team to form a deeper emotional connection. "As we strengthen our mental bonds, we form more empathy," he said. "When we reach true understanding between us, we can become genuine peace envoys." But Reagan sensed a threat in Xylar's offer. More empathy. This would mean exposing all our emotions. But that would leave us vulnerable, she thought. Lawrence, calm yet cautious, said, "We won't fall for their game. Empathy can also be a weapon. We have our boundaries." One night, chaos erupted in a distant corner of the Ulvron society. A faction of the Ulvrons had detected an enemy hidden among the peace envoys and began pressuring the suspects. Lawrence and Elliot instinctively felt danger when they noticed Xylar speaking to a group of Ulvrons close to them. What started as a discussion under Xylar's cold gaze quickly escalated into conflict. The Ulvrons unleashed emotional attacks triggered by their psychic abilities, pulling the humans into a storm of mental warfare. Each team member's emotions were shaken, their mental balance faltering. Lawrence struggled to suppress the rising anger and fear within him as he retreated. "Reagan," he shouted, his voice trembling but determined. "It's a trap. They're using our emotions against us." Reagan quickly moved to organize her team. "Take defensive positions. Prepare for psychic attacks. Control your emotions, or we'll lose." As the conflict turned physical, the Ulvrons began assaulting the humans with their minds. Elliot, grappling with voices echoing in his head and Ulvron warriors appearing before him, tried to build a mental barrier. But this was far more than a simple battle. The Ulvrons' empathy-based attacks were targeting the humans' most vulnerable emotional points, attempting to render them helpless. Reagan took a deep breath, focusing on forming a shield within her mind. The Ulvrons' assault was aimed directly at her heart. The intense anger and anxiety she felt were wearing her down. But she refused to give in. "My emotions aren't my weakness. They're my strength," she muttered. Finding balance within herself, she began to repel the attacks. Meanwhile, Lawrence devised an intuitive strategy. He had figured out the Ulvrons' weakness. Beneath their emotional manipulation lay deep-rooted fear. By reversing the emotional current and using empathy against them, Lawrence began to turn their own fear back on them. The Ulvrons staggered, and this was the turning point for the human team. In the end, the team managed to fend off the Ulvrons' psychic attacks using the strength of their emotional intelligence. But this victory was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Xylar's true intentions had yet to be fully revealed, and the real test for the humans was only just beginning. They had survived the emotional assaults of the Ulvrons, but the battle was far from over. Reagan and his team now understood that they were part of a much larger conspiracy. Behind Xylar's calm and friendly exterior, something darker lurked, perhaps even unknown to the Ulvron society itself. Reagan called an emergency meeting with his teammates. In the dimly lit room, fatigue and tension were visible on all their faces. Lawrence, still feeling the remnants of the mental attacks, spoke first. "This goes way deeper than we thought, Reagan," he said, fixing his eyes on their leader. "It's not all the Ulvrons, but some of them are definitely working against us. Xylar might be one of them." Reagan nodded thoughtfully. "Xylar's intentions remain unclear. He wants to manipulate our emotions, but we still haven't figured out why. He's hiding something, that's for sure." Elliot, studying the data on his computer screen, chimed in. "Something's really off here. There are locked files in the Ulvron database. High-level security protocols. It doesn't make sense for an empathy-driven society to have this much secrecy." Martha joined him at the screen. "We need to find a way into those files. If there's a real threat, we need to know what it is." Reagan decided on a plan. The team would distract Xylar long enough to bypass the security systems and access the hidden information. But this mission required more than just physical skill. They needed to control their emotions too. The Ulvrons could read minds, so they had to remain emotionally neutral to avoid raising suspicion. The first part of the plan involved keeping Xylar occupied. Lawrence took on this task. With his ability to subtly influence thoughts, he would meet with Xylar and occupy his mind long enough for the others to infiltrate the system. Meanwhile, Elliot and Martha would break into the database, and Reagan would secure the perimeter. Lawrence entered Xylar's chamber with a calm demeanor. Xylar gave him a penetrating look. "You seem different today, Lawrence," Xylar said. "I can feel the ripples in your mind. What's on your mind?" Lawrence felt a brief flicker of hesitation but quickly balanced his emotions. "Just adjusting to the energy waves of this planet," he replied. "I admire the Ulvron's ability to empathize. We humans still have a lot to learn in that regard." Xylar continued to watch Lawrence closely, as if trying to peer deeper into his thoughts. But Lawrence's mental defenses were strong. Xylar didn't seem to be launching a direct attack. Instead, he appeared to be analyzing Lawrence's emotions. The distraction was enough for Reagan's team to begin their operation. Elliot and Martha quietly approached the Ulvron database. The security measures were tight, but Martha's analytical skills and Elliot's technical expertise allowed them to breach the system. However, alarms suddenly blared. Something had gone wrong. "Hurry up, Martha," Elliot whispered urgently. "We've only got seconds." Martha's fingers flew over the keyboard, and finally, the restricted files opened. What they saw shocked them. The Ulvrons didn't just want humanity as peace envoys, they planned to use them as weapons of war. Xylar's true aim was to manipulate humans into fighting the Ulvrons' galactic enemies, using their emotional intelligence as weapons. "That's why they brought us here," Martha said, skimming through the data. "They're planning to turn us into emotional slaves. They want to start a kind of mental warfare." Elliot, frantically downloading the data, added, "We need to tell Reagan right away. This is spiraling out of control." Just then, Ulvron security forces stormed into the data room. Elliot and Martha immediately assumed defensive positions as the Ulvrons unleashed mental attacks on them. Elliot's mind became clouded, struggling to maintain emotional balance. But Martha, calm under pressure, erected a mental barrier. "Don't let them into your mind, Elliot," Martha shouted as she pushed back against the assault. "Their attacks target emotional weaknesses, but we can push them back." Elliot took her words to heart, trying to quiet the storm in his mind. The Ulvrons' attacks were aimed at destabilizing their emotions, using fear, anger, and anxiety to weaken them. But the team fought back, using their emotional intelligence as a defense. Martha reflected the Ulvrons' emotional waves back at them, creating a kind of mental shield. Meanwhile, Reagan reached Lawrence and quickly informed him of the situation. "We need to get out now," Reagan said urgently. "We've uncovered their plans, but if we stay any longer, they'll take over our minds completely." Lawrence shot Xylar a cold look. "This won't be the last time we meet, Xylar," he said. "We're not just pawns." Reagan and his team managed to escape with the crucial information. But they knew the Ulvrons wouldn't let them go so easily. As they fled, the mental attacks continued, trying to break their emotional defenses. Every strike aimed to destabilize their mental balance, but the team held strong. Emotional intelligence had become their most potent weapon, not just for defense but for counterattack. Once they reached a safe location, the team paused to catch their breath. But the victory was fleeting. The Ulvrons were still after them, not just physically but mentally. Elliot reviewed the downloaded files and confirmed their worst fears. Xylar intended to turn humans into mental slaves, not only for peace but also for galactic war. Reagan, deep in thought, looked at his team. "We're going to have to use more than just our physical strength in this fight," he said. "If the Ulvrons want to control us mentally, we'll need to confront their greatest fears." This was just the beginning. The team had learned to use emotional intelligence as a weapon, but the war was far from over. Despite uncovering the Ulvrons' plans, Reagan and his team still faced a tremendous threat. The balance of the galaxy had been shaken by the Ulvrons' desire to use humans as emotional weapons. Although they had limited information, it was enough to reveal the true intentions hidden behind the Ulvrons' facade of peace. The team had reached a point of no return. Although they had managed to repel the Ulvrons' mental and emotional attacks, they now faced an even greater obstacle: Xylar. As the leader of the Ulvrons, Xylar was both cunning and manipulative. If they didn't stop him, the fate of both themselves and all of humanity would be in his hands. They needed a plan. They had to weaken Xylar's ability to manipulate other Ulvrons and humans by using empathy as a weapon. Reagan looked at his team, determination clear in his expression. "We can neutralize Xylar by fortifying our mental defenses," he said. "But this won't be just a battle of the mind. We need to be physically prepared as well." Martha continued analyzing the data on her computer. Xylar acts as a focal point, channeling the collective mental power of the Ulvrons. If we can face him directly, we might be able to sever that connection. Elliot nodded in agreement. "But we'll need our emotional defenses to be at their strongest. Xylar will try to use our deepest fears against us." The plan was set. Reagan and his team were ready to confront Xylar. He was waiting for them in the deepest layers of the Ulvron ship, close to the mental core. Reaching him wouldn't be easy. The Ulvron security forces were prepared to stop them both mentally and physically. The team advanced cautiously. With every step, they faced mental assaults. The Ulvrons tried to disrupt their emotions and weaken their resolve. Lawrence's mind was bombarded with seeds of doubt and fear, while Elliot's mind was flooded with a fear of failure. But Martha remained calm, building a mental shield to protect them. Their emotional intelligence became their greatest weapon against the attacks. As they progressed through the corridors, the Ulvron warriors attempted to stop them with physical force as well. The Ulvrons could bend walls with their mind and hurl objects through the air. Reagan's quick reflexes saved them from the incoming debris. Lawrence managed to turn the mind-based attack of an Ulvron back against him, repelling the assault. Every moment of the battle was filled with intense pressure. They had to fend off emotional attacks while dodging physical threats. Yet the team's discipline, honed through years of training, kept them unified. Despite the waves of fear and doubt, they leaned on each other for support, maintaining their resilience. At last, they reached Xylar's chamber. The Ulvron leader greeted them with eerie calm. His eyes were deep and piercing, as if he could reach into their very souls. With his usual composed demeanor, Xylar began to speak. "Humans, I expected you to realize just how weak you truly are," Xylar said mockingly. "Your minds, your emotions, they're your greatest weakness. Why resist when you're so easy to manipulate?" Reagan stared back into Xylar's eyes. "Our minds, our emotions, they're our greatest strength. We won't submit to your manipulation." Xylar smiled coldly. "We'll see." With that, Xylar launched a powerful mental assault. He attacked the minds of every team member simultaneously, triggering their deepest fears and traumas. Elliot struggled with his long-standing fear of failure, while Martha was overwhelmed with guilt over her family's loss. Lawrence, too, grappled with feelings of inadequacy. Xylar had ignited a war within each of their minds. However, the team had trained for this moment. Using the techniques they had learned, they began to resist the attacks. By applying their emotional intelligence, they recognized that Xylar's illusions were not real. Martha, strengthening her mental defenses, overcame the rising wave of guilt in her mind. "You can't control me, Xylar," she whispered. Elliot and Lawrence fought back against their fears. Each one, pushing the limits of their emotional resilience, managed to repel Xylar's mental assaults. As their leader, Reagan provided unwavering support, using all his strength to push back the dark thoughts in his own mind. Realizing that his mental attacks were being neutralized, Xylar took a step back in fury. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "I thought humans were weak." Reagan, his voice steady, responded, "Our emotions are not a weakness, as you believed. They're our greatest power." At that moment, Martha made a critical move. She had discovered the mental link Xylar used to channel the collective power of the Ulvrons. Using the ship's computer systems, she emitted a frequency that severed Xylar's access to this mental network. Xylar, suddenly cut off from his source of power, fell to his knees. He was defenseless. Reagan stepped forward. "We've won this war. Humanity will not be enslaved." Xylar lifted his head one last time. "This is only the beginning. The Ulvrons will return." Reagan shook his head firmly. "And we'll be here." With Xylar neutralized, the Ulvron mental assaults came to an abrupt end. Reagan and his team had freed humanity from the threat of emotional enslavement, and the Ulvrons' plans were in ruins. Yet this victory marked only the beginning of a larger struggle. The galactic balance was still far from restored. Having secured this victory, Reagan and his team returned to continue their mission of protecting humanity. The conflict with the Ulvrons had taught them how crucial emotional intelligence and the power of empathy were in battle. They now understood that the future of the galaxy would not only be decided by physical force, but by mental resilience as well. This triumph would go down in galactic history as a turning point. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.